What I can say off the bat is that this is not the camera that I thought I needed, but it's the camera that I'm glad that I have now. Sedona, get away from my tripod. Back off. Come here. Hey, come here. Yeah, go over there. Go over there. With the C70, I was an early adopter in RF glass, and honestly, for a while, I was regretting it. This allows me to get proper use out of my RF glasses so I can finally feel like I'm getting my money's worth for my investment in that ecosystem. I started off kind of like oscillating between excitement and disappointment when this camera was announced, because at first I thought it was just going to be an R5 without overheating. And then I found out that they're switching the menus around. So you've got the cinema menus and the photo menus in one camera. And initially I was kind of pissed about that. I didn't need this to be a cinema camera. I already have other cinema cameras. I've got a C70, I've got a Komodo. So I was kind of annoyed, but as usual with Canon, user experience is greater than specs, as most things in life. It's got me seriously considering selling my other cinema cameras and just buying a second one. The Red's still gonna be the better image, but this is the better camera.
All right, so after getting eaten alive and having a night to sleep and decompress and evaluate the footage that we shot, I have some further thoughts to elaborate on. Again, this is more of a first impressions because I just personally don't believe in reviewing things unless they've actually been shot in actual productions. I know there are a lot of nerds out there who got this camera, get other cameras, don't actually use them for anything, and just talk about specs, or they go outside and shoot a pretty girl in a field at 60 frames per second. Proper review is gonna have to wait until I take this bad boy out to an actual client gig. That's gonna be next week. It's gonna be in Arizona. It's gonna be hot as shit, so the fan is gonna be put to the tests. I'm gonna go to Monument Valley right after, shoot some landscapes. I probably could have been more objective on my praise, and most of that praise still intact. I still think very highly of this camera, but there are certain things that I neglected to mention, which are legitimate issues. The first one, the most glaring one, is the battery life. It sucks. There's no way around it. The LPE6 NH battery, pure garbage. The cinema menu, I don't know what it is. It just doesn't do a very good job of optimizing the performance on the battery, because even when it dies, if you go to the photo menu, you still have half the battery left. So there's just some sort of deficiency in the power consumption in the cinema menu. Is that a deal breaker? Well, it depends. For me, no. I've been using the Anton Bauer Titan base, and honestly, that thing gets like 7 hours of battery life. It's perfect for me. Most of the time I have the camera on a tripod. If I want to shoot handheld, it's actually a benefit because it makes the camera heavier, so it helps stabilize those micro jitters. It's still light enough to put on a gimbal, and so for me, it's not a big deal. If you're somebody who doesn't like to rig cameras, then you're gonna hate it. The other thing is regarding the autofocus. It's still good. It's still better than the C70. It's still not as good as the R5, but based on the clips that we shot yesterday, I think it could be better, and I hope Canon releases a firmware that improves it. There's still a lot of potential. Like, the tracking actually works really well. It just doesn't always do the best job of keeping me in focus. But like, when you're looking on the camera in the back of the screen, you can see the little square. You can see that it's actually tracking my face. But there are times that it lost me, especially in the face only mode. You can see by these shots here that, like, for the most part, I am in focus, but there are times where it loses me. The face only mode is supposed to only hold on to things that are in the frame, specifically faces. When you leave the frame, it's not supposed to hunt for anything in the background. It's supposed to just pick up again when it detects another face. So the fact that you can see the background jumping in and out, it's a little frustrating, disappointing, not gonna lie. I still think it works pretty well, and I do need to do further testing, which I'm gonna put in the more comprehensive review. I don't want people to think that the autofocus on this camera is a train wreck either. It's not a Sony, okay? Let's be real, let's be honest. It's not that. But for most things, it's pretty good. For almost anything I would use it for, it's gonna work. It's tracking me right now. I'm using it right now for this video. It's holding onto my face. I don't see it having any issues. It's not struggling. So for interviews, talking head stuff, if you're gonna put it on a gimbal and just follow someone around, I think you're fine. I don't think you have to sweat it. If you're gonna track something with a lot of erratic movement, then you might want to reconsider. So, you know, again, take it with a grain of salt. Needs further testing, but that's just my initial impression. So the other thing I wanted to touch upon is its comparison to the Komodo, because I think yesterday there was a lot of talk about selling Komodos and, you know, this is better than the Komodo. I don't want to get it twisted. This is not going to beat the Komodo in a slugfest, okay? The Komodo still punches way harder than this camera. The color fidelity, the raw files, everything about the Komodo is going to give you noticeably better image quality. But this comes close. It's in the ballpark. It can compete, okay? If it's the NBA Finals, it's not going to get swept. It'll win 2 games, you know? It'll be a 4-2 series. Let's put it that way. So, but for a lot of people, and certainly for a lot of things that I do, that's more than good enough. Like it comes really close, and it's really good, especially the RAW. Like the RAW on the R5 was more of a gimmick. I never used it seriously. Maybe once or twice for amusement and curiosity, but it was never a legitimate option. The RAW on this camera is a real legitimate option. On a 512 gigabyte card, I get about 42 minutes of RAW, which is pretty good. It's not red RAW, but hey, you know, what is, you know, until that patent goes away. I think for personal projects, things that aren't going to require hours of shooting, I think it's a very viable option. For the things that I do, I would definitely use it. Certainly not for something like this or client interviews or a lot of the client work I do, but for personal projects, if I want to do spec work, short films, mini docs, probably on the job that I'm going to do next week, it's going to be actually a mini documentary featuring an artist. It's going to be about 2 minutes in length. I likely will shoot most of that in RAW on the R5C and on the Komodo, and maybe the interview portion I'll just shoot in 10-bit, except on the Komodo, which I'm going to shoot in RAW, which brings me to my next point. We have these dynamic range tests that we did, but they're not the most compelling tests because somebody, I'm not going to say who, forgot to put the Komodo in its proper RAW parameter mode. I can say that even based on the 10-bit ProRes from the Komodo, the dynamic range is still better than the R5C. I mean, is that a deal breaker? Again, for me, not really. I tend to shoot in controlled environments, so dynamic range isn't something that I really struggle with, to be honest, because I'm always controlling the variables of light. If I was a run and gun shooter, if I was doing like more run and gun documentaries, maybe I would be more concerned about it. But even then, I don't think it's that, you know, big of a deal. I think it's still pretty damn good. And again, it's still better than the R5. So we're comparing it to its predecessor. It gets about a stop and a half, and that is confirmed. And I noticed it right away too. When I first shot with this camera, I just saw like the highlight roll off was better. There was just something more pleasing about the image than the original R5. I still think for a lot of people, this camera is a great option. It could be somebody's A cam, it could be somebody's B cam. In my situation, it's going to be my A cam for a lot of things. Let's be real, because it's so convenient and it's so easy to shoot with this camera. This is going to be like the dumb, noob, friendly, fun camera for me. I was considering selling the red. I likely won't. The C70 is gone for sure. But there's still a place for the red, especially you'll notice here in the rolling shutter test. Again, The R5C isn't terrible. It's not atrocious. It's not like the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, which was horrible. But when you compare it to the Red, you see that the global shutter on the Red just produces a much more pleasing handheld look, in my opinion. I know Cam doesn't think it's that big of a deal. His Red is gone. He's selling it. But for me, it kind of shows me that there's still a place for the Red in my workflow. When I want to shoot action and handheld stuff, I'm definitely going to probably prefer the Red. But at the same time, the Red is a pain in the ass to balance. The Red is a pain in the ass for a lot of things, but especially balancing that thing on a gimbal. I don't want to use the Ronin 2 or a big gimbal like that. I like my RS2, and balancing the Red on it is annoying, and I never want to do it. And the R5C is way better for that. So that's going to be definitely the gimbal camera. And the Red in general is just annoying to use. You have to like rig it out. You have to put a monitor on it. You have to make it big. You have to black shade it, and that takes time. Like even yesterday when Cam and I both had our Reds, we were just kind of pointing at each other, and we spent like a good 2 minutes arguing over who should set up their Red, because nobody really wanted to, because it's annoying. Like I wanted to keep shooting what I was doing with the R5C. And look, I understand that a lot of those annoyances that I'm complaining about regarding the Red and other cinema cameras don't apply to people who work on larger sets. Like when I'm on those sets, it's a different ball game. But when you're shooting by yourself, every little piece of friction matters, the smaller the team is. Because when you're on those larger sets, you have a team of people and everyone's dedicated to their specific role. So cameras are meant to be rigged out so everybody can access what they need to perform their job. But when you're on a smaller set, when you only have one or two people, every little piece of friction matters, and every little thing that gets in your way becomes more annoying, more frustrating, because you're having to handle so many more tasks by yourself. And that's why I've been dreaming about cameras like these, because I don't often work on those large, big sets. Most of my video clients are either jobs that I'm DPing for someone else with a small team, or they're my own clients where I'm kind of handling everything, and maybe I bring in one or two people to help me out. So the fact that I can get the kind of image quality and a lot of the same features that I get on those higher end cinema cameras, but I don't have to have the headaches of rigging them and everything else that comes with it, makes me so happy, because again, I'm lazy, and the less that I have to worry about the camera getting in my way and the more that I can focus on the creative and the story and the job at hand, the happier I am. The R5C is like a cinema camera for people who don't like cinema cameras, like myself. It's got a lot of the awesome things and features about a cinema cameras, but fewer of the headaches and a lot of the conveniences of mirrorless cameras, which honestly, I love. I know that's kind of a controversial thing with people, like, oh, mirrorless cameras aren't real cinema cameras, but whatever. Like, I love a lot of things about mirrorless cameras. I love shooting with them. I love fewer things about cinema cameras, but you know, they have their place in my workflow for certain projects. Certainly the quality that you get out of some of those cameras is astonishing. For a lot of things though, you don't really need it, and it wouldn't be noticeable anyway. So the R5C comes really close with fewer of the headaches. And you know, again, it's a small camera. It can fit in my backpack. It's going to save my back a lot of pain. And it just also means that I can have my photo kit and my video kit with the same lenses kind of just tucked away in my backpack, and it's just going to make life a lot easier. So R5C, so far from my initial impressions, it's a home run. So who is this camera for? Well, honestly, just buy whatever the fuck you want, you know, if it makes you happy. If you are a content creator who does a lot of brand work, does a lot of social media work, you're going to love it. If you want to do short films, corporate documentaries, you're going to love it. You can use it as an A-cam. If you already have a C70 or a red Komodo or one of the other Canon cinema cameras like a C500 II, this is going to be an excellent B-cam, gimbal cam. So existence is going to be justified. Let's put it that way. So very happy with the camera. Obviously, some things can be improved. Certain things are disappointing so far, but I think they could be fixed with firmware. And they created this like just really compelling new product, really, because there's really nothing else like it in the market that just kind of crams like such powerful cinema features, but still doesn't compromise on the photo side, because it's an R5, and the R5, to me, in my opinion, is the best photo camera you can buy right now. Value wise, value for your buck. Obviously things like a GFX are going to have better image quality, and it's Canon. I like their colors better. Sony colors always look like jaundice to me. That's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth or not, I don't care. But that's, you know, another compelling reason why this camera is just going to fit into my workflow. I did want to touch on one more thing before I forget. The R5 had Ibis. This does not. This has the digital Ibis. Is it any good? I don't know. I haven't tried it yet. I'm going to have to go out of my way to try it, because to be honest, I never use it. Even when I had Ibis on the R5, I never used it. I don't think I've ever used Ibis on any camera that has it. That's not to diminish it or to diminish anyone who uses it. I know there's a lot of people who use it. I know there's a lot of great applications for it. It's just I've just never needed it, because I'm either shooting on a gimbal if I need pure stabilization, or if I'm shooting handheld, I like the raw kind of gritty nature of that look. I don't personally see it as a negative. In fact, I see it as a positive that this camera doesn't have Ibis, because then you can put it on something like a car mount or something without having the sensor floating around in space. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the initial impressions I have of the R5C. As you can see, they are overwhelmingly positive. There are a few things that I wish they would have done better. A couple of things that I'm crossing my fingers for firmware improvements. But overall, very happy with this camera. Can't wait to shoot more with it, and can't wait to collect more data, do more testing, put it through its proper paces, and come back with a more comprehensive review. And one other point that I wanted to touch on, I know that I didn't really talk about the C70 as much as I did about the Red. I compared it to the Red a lot. But really, the C70, I feel, is the camera that you're most likely going to have to choose between that or this, because if you're an R5 owner, you were probably debating getting a C70 or moving up, and then this came out, and now you're thinking, well, should I get this? It's got full frame, it's got 8K RAW, versus the C70 that has internal NDs, it's got that DGO sensor, and the dynamic range on that camera is really damn good. It's right up there with the Red. It's better than the R5C. The highlight roll-off is much smoother. I haven't really tested it too much, and I guess because personally I kind of felt like the C70 was redundant for me after buying this camera, so I have every intention of selling it. But I can confirm that the C70 does have better dynamic range. However, I always found the C70 personally to be a little too soft in the image, and I know that's a very subjective concept. Some people like it, some people think it's more filmic, whatever, some people like detail. I personally would rather have a more detailed image and then dial back the sharpness either in post or through diffusion, because you can always make things softer, but you can't make them more detailed. Then you've got, you know, audio inputs on the C70. They're on the body. Here you have to get the Tascam recorder. It does add about $500 to the total cost of the camera. So when you factor that in, the cameras are kind of neck and neck price wise. I don't really know what the C70 is going for right now, but I think it's about the same. There are pros and cons. Obviously, having it in the body means less stuff to rig, but I don't really mind the Tascam thing on this. I actually prefer the module, as I said earlier, because you can actually control it directly from the module. Don't have to go into the menus, makes things a lot easier and faster. Just pop it right off. Powered by the hot shoe, so don't even have to worry about batteries or anything like that. The other consideration, obviously, and this is a big one, is internal NDs. I personally hate screw-on filters, but I use them all the time. Because it's a compromise. The C70's internal NDs are fucking awesome, as is any camera with internal NDs. I wish they would have found a way to do it on this camera. I wasn't expecting it. Don't hold your breath for any of these mirrorless cameras to get internal NDs. It would have been really nice, but yeah, that's a tough one. I got nothing to say on that. I would miss it. Those internal NDs, it's a big feature. And if you really like it, I can understand why you would go with it. I'm willing to just deal with it, I guess. I've got a matte box, I've got the screw-on NDs, and I guess whenever I need one, I'll just deal with it, because I feel like everything else about the camera, the positives from it outweigh that particular negative, although not by that much, to be honest. One last thing too is that the C70's 120 is much better. The R5 and the R5C's 120 is another thing that is kind of disappointing. I was hoping that with the improvement in the cooling mechanism and the fan, that the sensor would be able to get better quality out of the 120, but it doesn't seem to be that much improved over the R5, which is kind of disappointing. Now, granted, I don't really shoot 120 that much. Whenever I do need slow-mo, 60 is more than enough for me personally, so you know, I could take it or leave it, but having it is nice for the handful of times that I want it. And if you're somebody who really uses it a lot, then the C70 is much better. But even then, that's not without its compromise, right? Because you lose the dual gain output of the sensor on the C70 when you go into 120. Rolling shutter improves, but you lose a lot of dynamic range. And so, you know, it's all trade-offs, man. Like at the end of the day, cameras are all about compromises and trade-offs. It's what can you live with and what can you live without. So we do the best we can, making the decisions we can based on our personal needs. And yeah, I will probably be selling the C70. I kind of don't want to because I like the idea of having it for its benefits, you know, what I like about it. But honestly, the idea of having a second R5C is way more appealing. But we'll see what I can get for it. If I don't get much for it, I might just end up keeping it. All these cameras are great. Like, you can't go wrong. Actually, at certain points, I hate talking about cameras because like literally any camera you get these days is gonna look amazing. Like, you're gonna be able to do some beautiful, crazy, great stuff with any of these cameras. So it's kind of like a lot of time wasted, like going over the details. So I'm not going to be doing this too much, but this camera is just so freaking special and so good. And I'm very happy with it. It's gonna fit my workflow quite nicely. So yeah, there you have it. Peace.